Hello and welcome to the Trent Valley Railway. This video will be looking at the Cork Underlay and sheets for the lower level and the start of the incline. This video is part of a series of videos that details the build of the Trent Valley Railway, with this video looking at the process I used for the cork underneath the track across the layout. This part of the build was done over the course of 2019, and we'll now take a look back at how I fixed the cork down to the baseboards. This is the lower level of the layout where the fiddle yard is now, and this shows before the cork sheets and underlay was put down on that section that the top of the baseboard was just plain and ready for the cork to go on top of that. So for gluing down the cork sheets and the underlay onto the baseboards around the layout, I've used Gorilla wood glue, which nicely bonds any type of material onto wood. So this has worked well all the way around on the lower level and on the inclines, and this is obviously just one of many glue products out there which will do such a similar job. For most of the larger sections on the lower level, I spread the glue right the way across the baseboards to get an even spread with an old piece of card, and made sure that it was all ready for then laying down these large sheets of cork onto the top of the baseboard. So this is then the progress for laying down those large sheets all the way down the fiddle yard side of the layout, and because I cut up the rolls in a certain way, the edges were already nicely aligned together to get a neat finish right the way across the fiddle yard side of the layout. On this side for the fiddle yard, as it's a considerable length, it means I've used 1 metre wide cork roll from eBay with a 2mm thickness. I've rolled this out in the sheets on this side for the lower level and straight on top of the baseboards. And as I said, I've glued it down with Gorilla Glue and then weighed it down to let it set with several pieces of spare wood and baseboards, having on top of that then some dumbbells and other books that were very heavy to make sure that the cork was all flat and then would bond to the baseboard. Approaching the garage door and across the removable section, we follow the progress that I made across the lower level for the 2mm cork sheets, where it connects up then with the baseboards on either side of the garage. Across to this side of the garage then, I've had to leave spaces around the inclines and the structures on the removable baseboard, as that wouldn't have been able to put down any track in those areas, so I haven't wasted the cork. But also then, because I'd already put the structures into the lower level of the layout, I didn't fancy taking those back out to put in a cork sheet underneath those sections there. So I've left those blank, and in the areas then where I will have the fiddle yard around the other side of the garage, I've continued to glue down the cork sheets, and then also glued down the Woodland Scenics foam inclines on this side, which also lead into the inclines for the baseboards that then go up to the next level of the layout. Around on the other side of the layout where I have the incline starting from the lower level, this shows that just spreading out the glue from the pot and then using that piece of card again to spread evenly across the baseboard, and then being able to then lay down the cork on top of that section there in front of the inclines. Here in particular, on the other side of the layout by the garage door, you'll see when it didn't have any of that cork underlay and sheets down, and then the difference then now with putting down those cork sheets ready for the track to be put down on the lower level of the layout. One of the things I found difficult when gluing down the cork sheets was the access and also the time taken to get the sheets to the right size, because I've built the framework for the inclines before I actually put down the cork on the lower level. This means then, as I said earlier, I had to cut around a lot of the structures underneath the main scenery level, and also then for the removable sections and the inclines. I also found difficulty trying to get to the very back of the fiddle yard and getting the cork sheets flat on that size and the right size so that they didn't break up or didn't have basically bumps and wasn't flat across the lower level of the layout. So if I started again, I would actually have probably applied the cork sheet across the baseboards at the lower level from the start and not worried about the inclines and structures above, as I could have put these on top of the cork sheets later on. Having explained the build for the lower level and the cork underlay sheets on top of the baseboards, the final parts of this video will now explain how I've used a thicker cork sheet at 4mm compared to the 2mm on the lower level, and then also how this has been used on the underlay for the inclines for 4mm cork, and this will then eventually get up to the scenery sections. So we'll now take a look in more detail at the transition of the cork sheets between the lower level and the start of the inclines. What I plan to do in this area with the foam section is to continue the thinner cork sheet on top of here until this section here then reaches the transition with the wooden baseboard sections, and then it will transfer into a much thicker piece of cork. So you'll see the difference here between the two pieces of cork that I'm using. The very thinner pieces here on the front, and then the thicker pieces at the very back. So there's a few millimeters difference of cork thickness there, and that transition will take place between the foam incline and the wooden baseboards. That will then mean that once I get to the scenic sections on the next level, it will have this thicker cork underlay, which will give a nicer scenery and context for the ballasting that will need to be done. I'm going to start off on the incline nearest the front of the board here and deal with the transition between the foam incline and the incline that then is on the baseboard sections. You'll notice in the video here I've already got the track wired up. I've done that in the meantime, and now I will take you through how to put on the sections of the cork underlay for, first of all, on top of the foam incline, and then we'll look at how I've completed the transition into the thicker cork underlay on the baseboard incline sections. I've removed the track and I've gone away and prepared the two pieces of cork underlay which need to go onto the incline, and I've also used the baseboard width, unscrewed that to make sure then that the thicker cork underlay is the right width, and then I've gone and screwed down this short section in between the foam incline and the longer sections of the baseboards. So the next job to do is to now put these two pieces, one onto there and the other one onto there, and to get that in the middle there nice and flush so that there isn't a difference in the levels. Across the layout I've been using Gorilla wood glue, and that nicely binds together the cork underlay and the baseboards, or in this case this foam incline, and also then to spread the glue around just using a piece of card from some of the spare packets of the points, to then spread around that glue on this section here before I'll then put down the smaller, thinner cork underlay sheet on this part of the incline. I've now put both of those cork sheets down on the incline, the thinner one on the left, which is used on the lower level of the layout, and obviously the thicker one on the right. You'll see in the very middle then is the join. That gives a really nice smooth flush finish between the two Cork Underlay sheets, and when I come round to shortly putting the track on it, you'll see there that that gives a very nice transition between those two sections there. What I've also done in doing that section at the very bottom of the incline is I've also then merged it into the lower level on the far left there, where there's also a join between the incline and the lower level of the layout. So the next part here is to carry on up the incline and then wait for all of the Cork Underlay to dry, put some stuff down on top of it to weigh it down and get it all flat, and then I can start to put the track down. With the cork sheets and the underlay now down on the lower level and the start of the incline, the next stage of the build is to progress towards track laying and creating the fiddle yard for the Trent Valley Railway.